Welcome back to Rise and Rouse, a podcast for those who give a damn. I'm your host, Erin Allgood, and I am so excited to share what's happening for Season 3. First, you might have noticed that I've migrated everything over to Substack. You'll be able to access bi-weekly posts as well as all the past and future episodes of Rise and Rouse. One thing to note is that we'll have two different versions of each episode. There's going to be a short version and a longer form version, which will be behind a paywall. The reason for that is just to help subsidize the cost of producing the podcast. I hope you'll understand and continue to support me in whatever way you can. Another thing that I'm excited to share is that Emerald Anderson Ford, who was a guest on Season 1, will be back for Season 3. Emerald and I have launched the Liberation Nexus Lab, a home for radical allyship, community building, and more. The lab is an online community as well as a resource hub and a home for our consulting work. We can't wait to share more about the lab as we get started. But for right now, you can go visit the website at liberationnexuslab.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter to hear more about what's going on. An exciting thing that is coming up in the next couple of months is our book study on pleasure. We will be talking about sex, substances, food, and everything else that brings us joy. It's going to be a lot of fun, and if you want to learn more about that, please make sure you go sign up for the Liberation Nexus Lab newsletter. That book study will go hand in hand with the conversation I'm having to kick off this season with Rachel MacNeill from Rachel MacNeill Intimacy Coaching. So please certainly follow Liberation Nexus Lab on all social media platforms, sign up for our newsletter, check it all out. And lastly, make sure you sign up for the Rise and Rouse newsletter, which you can find by going to allgoodstrategies.com. You'll never miss any alerts around the episodes, and you'll get to hear a little bit more about all of the other fun things that I'm up to. Don't forget to subscribe on Substack or just follow me there. I appreciate you connecting with me on all these different platforms, giving me a follow, being part of my community. It really and truly means the world to me. And I'm so grateful to have you all alongside me on this journey. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Rise and Rouse. I'm your host, Erin Allgood, social impact strategist and lover of intimacy. We are kicking off Season 3 with Rachel MacNeill of Rachel MacNeill Intimacy Coaching, where we talk all about sex. You are going to have so much fun listening to this episode. We talk about what it means to center pleasure in our lives and break free from the societal conditioning that makes it really elusive to find that kind of pleasure. Our conversation explores some of the bigger picture societal and systemic level implications of pleasure and bring it all back to what can you do in your day-to-day life to embrace more pleasure. This is one you won't want to miss. I'm really excited to share this with you all. So, Rachel, I'm so excited to have you here today. I would love to let you introduce yourself to everyone who's listening.
As you said, my name is Rachel MacNeill. I am a physical therapist by training, where I specialize in pelvic floor physical therapy. And most recently, I'm working as an intimacy coach, kind of as an offshoot of some of my pelvic floor practice and some of the things that my patients were telling me. So intimacy coaching, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. I'm really a partner with individuals and couples, helping them to improve pleasure and mutual satisfaction in their relationship and hopefully in other areas of their life too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited to talk with you today. This is one of those things that I feel like folks don't talk about, intimacy and how to cultivate intimacy in people's relationships. It's not one of those things that I think folks want to acknowledge as perhaps like an issue within their relationship. So it tends to like live in the shadows. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And it's interesting to me because the reason, or one of the reasons I became interested in doing this kind of coaching was because a lot of my cisgendered female clients were telling me the same stuff over and over again. And I think it's, stuff that intuitively we could imagine. Their partners really wanted a lot more sex. They didn't, or they were too tired, or they felt like they just didn't have a lot of interest. And so I think you're right. We don't talk about it very much, but a lot of us are saying the same exact things over and over. So it's kind of funny that we don't talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah. How did you get interested in doing all of this? I'd love to hear about your journey. I know, of course, like a little bit about your journey, but I'd love to hear how you arrived where you're at right now.
Totally. So I told you a little bit of how my clinical practice informed me getting into this work, but it's also deeply personal for me. I was married to a man for 4 years. We were dealing with some issues in our relationship, and a therapist that we saw told me that I was in a clinically defined sexless marriage. And when she told me that, I realized, oh my God, I'm going to die someday. And I cannot die having sex like 2 times a year. And so that was kind of, I think, what first planted the seed for me. And after I got divorced, I was really committed to never being in that kind of relationship again. Lovely man, but just not interested in the sexless part, as you can imagine. At the same time, I had started my work as a physical therapist. It's a second career for me, and started again hearing from what a lot of my patients and clients were saying. And I realized there's this awesome intersection of kind of my personal experience, my personal passion for improving people's sex lives, and then also there's a physical side of it too when it comes to like pelvic floor physical therapy. So some people are limited because they have pain with sex. There's certainly like desire and arousal issues that are more than just environmental. And so I think intimacy coaching just brings together a lot of my personal interests and professional experience in a way that I just think is so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so fun. And I feel like you are coming at this from an approach that feels really, I don't know, just natural and inviting and not scary at all.
I hope so. I think it's taken me personally even a little while to come to that, because I realize I talk with my patients, folks that I'm seeing just for straight up pelvic floor physical therapy. We're talking about urinary and fecal incontinence all day. And I think I had to just start to get really comfortable with a lot of things that probably before I was doing this work, I wouldn't have been super comfortable with either. And I do think that's part of the fun of it, because communication can be so challenging. Especially if it feels embarrassing or foreign, or we don't know what words to use. So I agree.
Yeah. And I think that being able to have that clinical understanding definitely helps you to be able to like talk with folks in like that bedside manner, certainly. I'm also interested, of course, though, and you and I know that we're going to talk about this, but like the like bigger picture, like social justice systems level view, and why this work is so important. Like, why do we care about pleasure? Why do we care about centering that in our day-to-day lives? Because it's within kind of the dystopian hellscape of capitalism that we're living in right now. The pleasure part of things feels really, really distant and not always accessible. So why is that so important for us to actually start to engage with it in some way?
So I think broadly for any client, getting to slow down, enjoy pleasure, pay attention to what our senses are telling us. Most of us feel like we don't have the time, I think, to do that. And it's just like hustle, hustle, hustle. We have to be as productive as possible. And I think that, again, you know, my kind of realization was that I was going to die someday and that this was not all worth living for. There had to be something more than just working really hard. And I think that sex really allows us to can I swear?
Yeah, of course. Fuck is in the title or in the description.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Perfect. So it's kind of just like a fuck you to capitalism and to all of these structures that say that we don't own our pleasure, we don't own our lives. Like really the most important thing and the thing that's going to define us is how productive we are, whether that's for money or labor at home or whatever. And I think it's an escape from all of that. And I think that's amazing. I often say like sex to me is one of the only places where 2 adults can come together, or more adults, or even alone, to just have imaginative play. It allows us to create like whole new worlds together if we want to, and it doesn't cost anything. And so I love that about it. And I think the other piece for me, again, kind of getting back to some of what my patients were telling me and what got me interested in this work, is just women in particular, and women with small children and things like that, are working so hard. And I think at the end of the day, sex often feels for them like it's one more thing that someone is demanding of them. So not something that they really get to enjoy and look forward to. And I think that is a tragedy. Anything that we enjoy, you shouldn't have to convince us that we should do it. And I think bringing more of that actual pleasure to anybody, especially somebody who feels like they're serving all the time, is really awesome.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, within my own life, it feels like there are just so many demands on all of my time and energy and everything like that too. And so it doesn't surprise me that other folks have that same kind of feeling when it comes to sex too, that it just is like another thing that's being demanded. And the way that you're describing that too, it feels like it is, you know, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but like it feels like it is something that's being like done to them. You're not fully participating in it.
Yeah. And I think it can feel that way. And I think in a lot of ways, it also can be true, just because of the way we were raised, especially relationships between men and women, or cisgendered men and cisgendered women, where I do think there are a lot of stereotypes and preconceived notions that we have that tell us, like, especially as women, like, oh, we're going to take too long, and so it's not worth it to demand is too strong a word, but like to expect that we're going to have pleasure in return, because that's just more than we should be allowed to ask for. It's like, it absolutely is not, right? And is it better or worse to take longer? I would say sex is a lot of fun. So why do you want it to be over quickly?
Right.
It should last a long time if we can let it.
Yeah. I mean, right. Exactly. Like, why are we trying to rush through that? Like, we're trying to rush through everything else in our lives.
Right. Well, and I think this relates a lot to stuff that you and I have talked about too. So I was married to a man for a while, and part of the reason my marriage ended is because I don't know why, but I decided one day that I was never going to like fake a moan again. And so I was like, you know what? If guys can lie there silent while we do whatever, like I am not going to like put on an Academy Award winning performance on top of which I might never even have an orgasm, right? And not to say that orgasm is the be all end all, but it's like, I'm not doing that anymore. And so I think when that relationship ended, I stopped dating men. I realized that my attraction kind of was lying elsewhere. And after that, I was just with folks who, let's just say, are not cisgendered men. So lots of different gender presentation. And currently I'm married to a woman. And I think as I started to date other people and sleep with other people, I started to realize, like, when you don't have those gendered expectations and everything is on the table, because it really is just about what you like and what you enjoy, that there's like a world of pleasure out there that is a lot deeper. And I think a lot more authentic than just like these like stereotypes that we've got, which, I don't fault anyone for. I think we all swim in that sauce, but it could be a lot richer, I think.
Yeah. I was giving a workshop last night on dismantling white supremacy culture. And one of the things that I was talking about with everybody was that, dismantling white supremacy culture happens primarily in our minds, right? Like we have to start to break away from the constraints and the conditioning that have been kind of handed down to us, because we are living in this, like you said, in the sauce here. Like we're swimming through this culture, and it touches everything that we are, every single aspect of our lives. And so, of course, that would extend to sex as well, too, and intimacy and relationships. Right. And it was very interesting as I was talking about white supremacy culture characteristics with folks, that a couple of people were like, yeah, like I'm seeing parallels between kind of the conditioning and the culture, those characteristics that might, appear in institutions and systemically and things like that. And they're seeing parallels to their own relationships. And I was like, oh, that was like, it was a dimension I wasn't expecting people to bring up in that moment, but it was really, really insightful, very cool to see people making those connections.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we deal with this type of stuff on a global or like a bigger level every day in our lives, it would be really awesome if our intimate relationships did not replicate the things that hurt our hearts or make us so sad in the day to day. Right.
Like, I mean, I don't think that people think about the fact that they're replicating those systems of oppression in their daily lives, but we absolutely are, because we don't have other models for these things.
Exactly. I learned a long time ago, and I think this is true, that actually the origin of the word vagina comes from sheath for a sword.
I love
which I just think
that.
kind of like says it all, right? Exactly. Like, what's the purpose? A sheath for a sword, man. Like that. No, thank you.
No, it's funny because to me, I'm like, sheath for the sword that I'm storing in there so that I can go fight dragons, maybe. That's what to me that was for me. Like, oh, sure.
It's only.
I flipped it in my own mind. Yeah.
Right. That's a lot more pleasant than I'm getting stabbed by something. Definitely.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about queering your relationship then too, because because I think for folks, I mean, it's a very kind of like evocative like way of phrasing something. But is like very, as you and I all talk about, like very basic in a lot of ways too, and very elementary, like when you start to realize it. But certainly if there's cisgender men who are listening, they might feel a little bit threatened by something like that of like, oh, why would my girlfriend be queering our relationship? What does that mean?